My name is Susan Gladstone Pasternak, and I am the very proud current Executive Director of the Jewish Museum of Florida-FIU. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to our very first program of 2022, Jews of Florida in Entertainment, the Arts, and Culture, in honor of the beginning of Florida Jewish History Month. I would just like to take a moment to extend a special thank you to Museum Manager Nancy Cohen for organizing today's event. Now it's my great pleasure to tell you about our very special guest, Marcia Jo Zerivitz, LHD. She is the founding executive director of the Jewish Museum of Florida-FIU and author of the book, Jews of Florida, Centuries of Stories, which you can see right here over my shoulder. This book is the first comprehensive history of Jews of Florida from 1763 to present times. Now, our theme this year for Jewish History Month, Jews in Entertainment, the Arts and Cultures, is in conjunction with our current exhibitions. Hello, Gorgeous, The Life of Barbra Streisand. And although Barbra Streisand is not a Florida Jew, we were very fortunate to be the only museum, Jewish museum in the country outside of New York, where this exhibit originated, to be chosen to host this exhibition. So we're very proud of that. Marty Kreloff, a retrospection of his paintings. And we have on display beautiful menorahs from the private collection of Rabbi Howard Berman. I invite you all to visit us in person. It is only through the support of you, our members and donors, that we're able to continue to bring you such exciting live exhibitions and both live and virtual programming. It is particularly special for us to have Marcia Zerivitz with us today, as it was she who initiated the legislation that led to the creation of both Florida Jewish History Month, held in January, and also Jewish American History Month, held in May and celebrated countrywide. These were created to increase awareness of the contributions of Jews to the quality of life for all. Marcia's book includes the stories of many, many Jews in Florida's history and those still working today who have made a major impact in areas such as art, theater, music, literature, movies, and of course, museums. So please join me in welcoming our guest to share these stories with us, Marcia Jo Zerivitz.
Thank you, Susan, and Happy New Year to all, and welcome to our Zoom presentation today. The recipient of the 1978 Nobel Prize for Literature and a Surfside resident, for those of you that are not Miami, Surfside is like just north of Miami Beach. Resident Isaac Bashevis Singer said, "At its best, the arts can be nothing more than a means of forgetting the human disaster for a while." End quote. Surely we all need a reprieve from the current human disasters. This topic connects, as Susan said, to the current exhibit at the Jewish Museum of Florida called Hello, Gorgeous, celebrating the life and career of Barbra Streisand. A long and provocative discussion has been going on in America about the historical relationship between the nation's Jews and entertainment. This topic is both celebratory, as in identifying Jews, and complex, as in examining American popular culture. In other words, the topic is vast. I am here to discuss this topic as it relates to Florida for two reasons. As Susan said, I wrote a book, Jews of Florida, where Jews in Entertainment is one of my chapters, and two, because of the museum's current exhibit, Barbra. So let's review how Floridian Jews have entertained us. Over all of Florida's history, residents and tourists have been drawn in part by its entertainment venues and cultural arts talents. Jews have played important roles in creating this mecca that includes Walt Disney World, Feld Entertainment, music, dance, artists, art collectors, literature, producers, theater, performing arts, and of course, museums. During her last tour in December of 2016, Barbra performed in Florida, in both Sunrise and in Miami. Over 40,000 people attended. She had not been in Florida since 1963 before that, and hasn't toured here since. Barbra is recognized in the entertainment industry for her achievements in film, record, and on stage. According to Billboard magazine, Streisand is one of the best-selling artists of all time and the only artist to have a #1 album in each of the last 6 decades. And she has achieved her success on her own terms. She refused to change her name or her nose. Unlike many other actors and singers who became famous in the 1960s, Barbra trumpeted her Jewishness in both film and music and did not try to hide or diminish it. Barbra is known for portraying strong, independent Jewish women on film, such as Fanny Brice in both the Broadway and film versions of Funny Girl, as Katie Morosky in The Way We Were, and Dr. Susan Lowenstein in The Prince of Tides, among many others. And of course, Barbra connects to I.B. Singer using his story, Yentl the Yeshiva Boy, for her 1983 film, Yentl, when she played both a Jewish man and a Jewish woman in her first of many films that Streisand both starred in and directed. As Susan said, January is Florida Jewish History Month. With the help of Senator Margolis, I was able to achieve this with the legislature in 2003, that each January will be a time to focus on how Jews have contributed to the development progress of the Sunshine State. We have had curricula approved on this subject for all the schools in 67 counties since 2004. As Susan said, I also initiated American Jewish Heritage Month, which is each May. That began in 2006. In 2013, we had an American Jews in Entertainment as the national theme. So I was asked to prepare a PowerPoint for that occasion. This highlighted a large topic where Jews have contributed in far greater proportion than their numbers would suggest. From silent films, vaudeville, Yiddish theater, and Nickelodeons, to Hollywood studios, comedy, radio, TV, and Broadway, the list of Jewish names as creators of media institutions and as performers is staggering. This presentation demonstrated how Jews came as immigrants, became more American, and while entertaining America, made America more Jewish. Look, Ma, I'm in the movies, and this is for real. This Mendelssohn family settled in Live Oak, Florida in the 19th century. One of the earliest photos I collected related to entertainment is this delightful one of Louis Mendelssohn in Jacksonville in 1908. This is actually a postcard sent by Louis to his mother, telling her that he was in a film. Florida's relationship with filmmaking began in 1908 with a subsidiary of Thomas Edison's General Film Company, Kellum Studios. It set up shop in Jacksonville for their first silent film productions. Kellum went on to produce 18 films in Jacksonville before returning to New York in 1909. These films would be the seeds for America's love affair with the Sunshine State and help make it the tourist destination it is today. Immigrant Jewish entrepreneurs like Carl Lemmy, William Fox, Adolf Zucker, Louis B. Mayer, Marcus Lowe, Sam Goldwyn, Harry Cohn, and Harry Warner created Hollywood, the mecca of the film industry. Jews also conceived the 3 major TV networks, William Paley's CBS, David Sarnoff's NBC, and Leonard Goldinson's ABC. Jews comprise about 2% of the nation's population, yet today about 2/3 of leading TV and movie producers are Jewish. Most sitcoms include a Jew today. There are more Jewish film festivals, more Jewish characters on TV and in film, and Yiddish words are common on TV. When we think of this topic, we conjure up New York and Los Angeles, right? But my talk today will focus on Florida. Before there were movies, there was Yiddish theater. The Tomaszewskis were the most celebrated in the Yiddish theater impresarios. In 1881, 12-year-old Boris Tomaszewski arrived in New York from a shtetl in the Ukraine. 1 year later, he became a producer and director of a company that toured the United States. In 1891, he married Bessie. Their son, Theodore Herzl Tomaszewski, was a poet and a painter. And their grandson, oh, it's on the other side. I was thinking I had another slide, but the son, Theodore Herzl Tomaszewski, is on the right, was a poet and painter. And their grandson, Michael Tilson Thomas, founded the New World Symphony on Miami Beach. This is an orchestral academy for gifted young musicians whose mission is to prepare highly gifted graduates of distinguished music programs for leadership roles in orchestras and ensembles around the world. Tilson Thomas currently serves as president of the Tomaszewski Project that records and preserves his grandparents' theatrical achievements. He was the 2019 Kennedy Center honoree. For decades, Miami Beach flourished with half a dozen Yiddish theaters. Yiddish radio broadcaster Jacob Schechter, shown on the left, came to Miami in 1944. Known as the king of Yiddish radio, he permeated South Florida airwaves on 6 different stations. He managed the 15-seat Biscayne Plaza Theater on Miami Beach, shown in this photo, which opened in 1926, the second theater to be built on Miami Beach and the area's first Yiddish theater. It was located on Biscayne Street, now known as South Point Drive, between Collins and Washington Avenue, actually right across from Joe Stone Crab Restaurant. It was demolished in 1959. Jacob Schechter was also responsible for the first Jewish legitimate plays presented in Miami. Molly Pecan was a star in Yiddish theater and film. The first lady of the musical stage was introduced to audiences in 1904 when she was 6 years old. The little Yentl with the big expressive eyes entertained for over 7 decades with her song and dance routines while helping to popularize the Yiddish culture into the American mainstream. She, amongst the others, performed on Miami Beach in this theater. Built in 1934, the 1,200-seat Cinema Theater was the longest-running Yiddish theater, Yiddish vaudeville house in South Florida, and possibly the country. Many Jewish senior citizens spoke no English, so this was a welcome treat. 3 shows a day, 7 days a week, it offered well-known Yiddish actors from all around the world, as well as hundreds of Catskills performers. Here's what the Cinema Theater looked like in the early 1970s, when it was still being used for Yiddish theater and vaudeville. The Cinema Theater was later converted into a film theater, and then it became a nightclub. When I created the outline for my book, I included a chapter on Floridian Jews and entertainment, the arts and culture. Of course, the stories I share with you are a generation or 2 later than what I've been referring to, and are just some of the stories. And the impact on Florida has been huge. In my book is a collection of stories that I gathered over 35 years of research about pioneer Jews who settled in Florida. One is Prussian-born Simon Benjamin, who came to Alachua County in 1865, right after the Civil War. When he was run out of town in Waldo by the Ku Klux Klan, he moved to Ocala, where he already had relatives, and he became very active in business, civically, and as president of the temple. Jews moved around the state to improve their economic opportunity, and Jacksonville had the state's largest Jewish population until 1940. Simon, in the center in the red circle, moved into Jacksonville in 1901, began a tobacco business, and served as president of the congregation there. His son, Roy, on the left, became an architect who was acclaimed for theaters. He designed more than 200 Art Deco theaters, movie theaters, one in nearly every Florida town, including in 1934, the Art Deco Classic Colony Theater on Lincoln Road on Miami Beach that showed films from those studios that I talked about earlier, founded by Jews. And this one in Winter Park. It closed as a theater in 1975 and is now a pottery barn. In Miami in 1925, Mitchell Wolfson founded a movie theater chain, Wametco, Wolfson Meyer Theater Company, with his brother-in-law, Sidney Meyer. Wolfson controlled Wilmecco until his death in 1982. It became a giant entertainment and leisure time conglomerate that was sold by the family for nearly $1 billion in 1983, the largest corporate sale in the history of South Florida at that time. In 1943, Mitchell Wolfson served as mayor of Miami Beach. He went off to serve in World War II, and then in 1949, he and his brother-in-law started Florida's first TV station in the first Wilmecca Theater. It was the nation's 16th TV station, WTVJ. The Wolfson family is another example, like the Benjamins, of settling in Florida in the 19th century. The first Wolfson to land in Florida was Joseph, who came into the port of Key West around 1884 in the aftermath of a shipwreck. At that time, with a population of 18,000, Key West was the largest and richest city in all of Florida, but there were continuous threats of yellow fever, malaria, and typhoid fever. Nonetheless, he found Key West more desirable than his hometown of Batka, Russia, due to the harsh conditions for Jews. So Joseph sent for his brothers to join him in 1887. First came Adam, who by 1920 had moved to Tampa with his sons. Later in 1887, Lewis and Rosa Wolfson joined them in Key West. Lewis, who was the father of Mitchell, learned English, began as a peddler like many other Jewish immigrants, and then opened a large, successful dry goods business shown in the red circle. And this is in Key West. The Wolfsons had 4 children in Key West, one of whom, as I mentioned, was Mitchell, and another was Xenia, who married Sidney Meyer. So that's the connection that made Wilmecco. How did they get from Key West to Miami? Lewis and Rosa moved the family in 1915 because Rosa felt the future was there for her children. And she was right. Descendants continued to live in Florida. I don't want you to think that Florida Jewish history just began in the 19th century. So when did Florida Jewish history begin? Most are not aware that Jews could not live in Florida as Jews for 250 years after Florida was discovered in 1513. That is when Ponce de Leon reached Florida's east coast. Since this was during the Inquisition and Ponce de Leon sailed for Spain, which then owned Florida, only Catholics could live here for the next 250 years. Giving you a little background for those that have not heard my talks before, so you'll know the context of the Jews that were involved in entertainment. So Jews could not settle in Florida until 1763. This is when the Treaty of Paris was signed, following the 7 years of French and Indian War, the final phase of the century-long Anglo-French struggle for colonial and commercial supremacy. In this treaty, Spain ceded Florida to Britain, and people other than Catholics could finally settle, including Jews. The first Jews to arrive were these 3 Jews here: Alexander Solomon, Joseph de Palacios, and Samuel Israel, who bought property and stores in Pensacola and did business with the British and others. We are taught that American Jewish history began when the first Jews arrived in America in 1654 in New Amsterdam, that became New York, after sailing from Brazil to escape the Inquisition there. In the early 1980s, when I began research, it was my hypothesis that it was possible that American Jewish history started in Florida in 1565 in St. Augustine with conversos. And now with the research that has been done most recently at the St. Augustine Jewish Historical Society, we now have documentary evidence that Antonio Martinez Carvajal was the chief harbor pilot in St. Augustine from 1577 and 78, was the first person of Jewish descent in what would become the United States. We do know that 200 years before, 26 years before Florida's 1845 statehood, one Jew took advantage of the development opportunities, and this was Moses Levy, who developed his pilgrimage plantation in Micanopy, Florida, that lasted and from 1822 till the beginning of the Second Seminole War in 1835. Moses Levy was also father of David Levy-Yulee, who was the first Jewish senator in the United States Congress and the first senator to represent Florida. I just want to point out also that David Levy-Yulee was important economically as well as politically. He built the first railroad to bring goods from Europe across the state. This Florida map tells a large story. It reflects the sequence of the earliest documentation of Jewish life in communities around the state. It'll give those of you that are not familiar with this history a sense of where each community sits in the Jewish history of Florida overall. The first was Pensacola that I mentioned in 1763, then Micanopy in 1819, then Tallahassee in 1837, then Key West that I mentioned in the 1840s, and Jacksonville in 1841, and Tampa in 1844, which is still 48 years before anyone settled in South Florida. There was no South Florida. Ocala in the 1850s, Orlando, 1865, then Palm Beach and Miami in anticipation of Flagler's Railroad that started settling in 1892, then St. Petersburg in 1901, Broward County, the first place was Davie in 1910, then Sarasota and Miami Beach in 1913, Fort Lauderdale in 1915, Boca in 1931, which today has the largest population of Jews in the state. And then finally, the southwest area of Florida, Naples and Fort Myers, which settled beginning in the 1950s. So this is a little background. Now to refocus on entertainment. You recognize Barbara Walters. The original family surname was Warmwasser. Barbara is a retired broadcast journalist, author, and TV personality, as you know. Known for her interviewing ability, Walters appeared as host of numerous TV programs, including Today, The View, 2020, and the ABC Evening News. But did you know that she lived on Miami Beach and went to public schools beginning in 1939 for 5th through 7th grades? She lived on Miami Beach again after 1 year in New York City. Why was she living on Miami Beach? From 1940 on, for 20 years, her father, Lou Walters, owned the Latin Quarter nightclub at 159 Palm Island, the hottest address in American nightlife. The nightclub was a mecca for big-name entertainers who performed for the winter crowds. With his partner, E.M. Lowe, the owner of the Lowe's Theaters, he booked the top bands, singers, and comedians. After the Latin Quarter, Walter moved his show to the Carillon on Miami Beach, the 1959 Hotel of the Year, where his elaborate productions were considered the best on the beach for several years. And I want to make note here that Norman Giller, who was the Jewish Museum of Florida's first president, designed the Carillon Hotel in the 1950s. In 1982, Mitchell Kaplan opened his first Books and Books in Coral Gables, where famous authors made appearances. In fact, his first reading and signing was Isaac Bashevis Singer. In 1984, he co-founded with Miami-Dade College the Miami Book Fair, which had an annual attendance of about 200,000 people. Kaplan loves to read, has a consistent relationship with editors and agents, had a vision of making movies from his favorite books, and is now half of the film and TV production firm Mazer Kaplan Company. They produce The Man Who Invented Christmas and the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Society, among other films. Josh Shader is a TV producer and writer. He's a fifth-generation Jew in the Orlando Shader family. Moving to Los Angeles in 1999, he became part of the American Pie franchise. Shader is the proudest of his unscripted TV stars series, The Chair. He won the TV Critics Association Award for Best Reality Series, got rated 100% by Rotten Tomatoes, and won a Directors Guild Award. Mitch Glaser is a movie producer, writer, and actor. He was born in Key Biscayne, graduated from Miami Beach High School in 1970, and then went to college. Glaser wrote for music production and settled in Hollywood, California to write and act in movies. He became a film and TV producer with a long list of credits, most notably for Star's TV series Magic City, based on his life growing up in Miami, which was produced in 2012. The Recruit in 2003, Lost in Translation the same year, Great Expectations in 1998, and Scrooge in 1998 with Bill Murray. Billy Corbin was born in Fort Myers, Florida. A child actor, his early appearances included roles in TV series Dear John, Parenthood, LA Law, and the films Step Monster and Archie to Riverdale and Back Again. After graduating from the University of Miami, Corbin pursued a career in documentary filmmaking. His directorial debut, Raw Deal, A Question of Consent, premiered at the 2001 Sundance Film Festival to wide acclaim. His other works, namely Cocaine Cowboys, The U, and Dogfight, center on South Florida subject matter and showcase Corbin's directorial interest in sports, the illegal drug trade, and the darker history of Miami. Following its theatrical release, Cocaine Cowboys became the highest rated documentary on the Showtime cable network. Corbin currently resides in Miami and is the co-founder of Miami Beach-based production company Rock Contour. Howard Rowland moved to Orlando with his family in 1970 to be vice president of corporate contracting and purchasing and an officer of the Walt Disney Company, overseeing Disney World, the Magic Kingdom, Epcot, and Euro Disney. During the opening of Magic Kingdom in Orlando, Rowland's name was imprinted on a window on Main Street to honor his work. Lou Jacobs came to the United States from Germany in 1923. He was a master clown who performed for Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus for 60 years, from 1925 to 1985. Circus performers have long argued that Lou Jacobs made more people laugh in live performances than anyone else in history. His sketches became clown classics. His most famous innovations were his unique makeup and fully functional midget-sized car into which he stuffed his more than 6-foot body frame. He lived in Sarasota and died there in 1992. Most parents would be upset if their sons told them they wanted to run off with the circus. When twins Gary and Philip Leshinsky made that decision, however, it was a parent's dream come true because it brought them into the family business. Their father was one of the original creators of the indoor circus and one of the two promoters for Ringling Brothers in the late 1950s. This gave the twins the knowledge and the experience that would enable them to put on shows starring legendary white stallions from a 400-year-old bloodline. These are the world-famous Lepensander Stallions that were based since 1989 in Oviedo, Florida, near Orlando. When the horses aren't traveling around the world, they're training there. The stallions were bred for battle centuries ago, but now the stunning white Lepensanders perform an equine ballet. Beginning in 1970 until his death in 2019, Gary Leshinsky produced their touring shows, a celebration of the 50th anniversary of the heroic rescue of the Lepensander breed in 1945, just before the end of World War II, by the U.S. Army's 2nd Cavalry under the command of General George Patton. He saved these horses. I grew up with the Leshinskys as my neighbors in Charleston, West Virginia, and Gary told me that the Lepensander is typically born black, and over a period of 6 to 10 years, its coat fades to its final pure white color. I thought that was amazing. The horses reach their peak performing ability between the ages of 15 and 25. I mentioned the family as promoters of the Ringling Brothers Circus. When Ringling announced the sale of the circus in 1967, the Leshinskys lost the bid to Irvin Feld, the other promoter. Feld Entertainment is the local global leader in live family entertainment, with as many as 5,000 performances on 6 continents in more than 70 countries. In other words, they are huge. The global headquarters is in Florida, is in the 2nd largest building in the state after NASA's Cape Canaveral facility. The family-owned company with 3,000 employees began in 1967 with the purchase of the now defunct Ringling Circus, then expanded into additional live shows such as theatrical, Disney on Ice, Disney Live, Nuclear Cowboys, and motorsports. They are really big. Jerry Herman, the Broadway composer-lyricist who gave America the rousing musicals Hello, Dolly, and Mame in the 1960s, and Broadway's first musical featuring gay lovers in La Cage aux Folles in the 1980s, died in December of 2019 on Miami Beach where he had lived. Many of his show tunes have become pop standards, as you know. In 1953, he graduated from the University of Miami, where he produced, wrote, and directed a college musical called Sketchbook. It was scheduled to run for 3 performances, but the show created an instant demand and ran for an additional 17 performances. He's been nominated 5 times for the Tony Award and won twice. In 2009, Herman received the Tony Award for Lifetime Achievement in the Theater. He received the 2010 Kennedy Center Honor. The Jerry Herman Ring Theater at the University of Miami honors him. Also connected to the Ring Theater is writer, actor, director, and studio owner Jeff Gillen. Passionate about the arts from a young age, he performed in productions at the University of Miami, his alma mater. Gillen appeared in many films shot in Miami. He was a member of the Screen Actors Guild, a frequent guest for the Miami Herald, and the founder of Great Southern Studios in North Miami Beach. By far his most famous role, Gillen portrayed the grouchy mall Santa Claus in the 1983 holiday classic, A Christmas Story, a film inducted into the National Film Registry in 2012. After Gillen died in 1995, the cities of North Miami Beach and North Miami designated 151st Street as Jeff Gillen Way, honoring his accomplishments as one of Florida's motion picture pioneers. Picking up from Jerry Herman of Broadway fame, Miami native Adam Epstein early developed an interest in theater, kicking off his career as a Broadway producer. His theatrical productions have received 46 Tony nominations and 12 Tony Awards, one of which Epstein himself received as a producer of the hit musical Hairspray in 2003. Epstein has worked as a producing associate of The Life, an associate producer on A View from the Bridge, a producer on Amadeus, The Crucible and Crybaby, and a producer on The Wedding Singer. Epstein currently works in political media and hosts his own show, The Dispatch, via YouTube. Lori Wyman is an award-winning Florida casting director who broke the glass ceiling in the male-dominated feature film industry. For more than 30 years, she has cast many of the largest blockbuster movies, commercials, and popular TV series produced in the Southeast. Wyman began her career in the 1980s when she cast the Miami Vice TV series starring Don Johnson. Some of her other film movie projects include Dolphin Tale 2, Marley and Me, Striptease, and Rosewood. Presently, she is casting for HBO's Ballers, starring Dwayne Johnson, and Bloodline for Netflix, starring Kyle Chandler. This is one of the largest performing arts centers in the nation, with 570,000 square feet, nearly 5,000 seats in 3 halls, and more than 300 annual performances. Business leader Adrienne Arsht donated $30 million to the construction cost. Arsht moved to Miami in 1996 to run her family-owned bank, Total Bank. As chairman until 2007, she grew the bank from 4 locations to 14, then sold the bank for $300 million. A philanthropist to the University of Miami and others, in 2004, Arsht became the first woman in Miami-Dade County's United Way $1 Million Roundtable. Arsht was the first woman to receive the Carnegie Hall Medal of Excellence in 2017. Named for citrus magnate Dr. Philip Phillips, the center is within walking distance of the house he and his wife Della owned more than 100 years ago in Orlando. In his day, Dr. Phillips hosted many concerts, bringing acclaimed musicians from all around the world to play on his front lawn for the entire Orlando community to enjoy. Housed on a 9-acre, 2-block site, this performing arts center has 5,125 seats, a little bit larger than the Arsht, in 4 halls and an arts education spaces. It has been named one of Travel and Leisure magazine's 25 new tourist attractions worth adding to your bucket list, and one of the Southern Living magazine's 50 best places in the South. For more than 5 decades, press agent Charlie Cinnamon was the face of theater in South Florida. After serving in World War II, Cinnamon went to New York City with a major in journalism and got the exhilarating taste of Broadway theater. He moved to South Florida in 1953 and worked as a press agent for some of the biggest names in showbiz, turning their appearances into glamorous events. He is known for founding the annual Coconut Grove Arts Festival and for his promotional and philanthropic work. Charlie Cinnamon, legendary press agent, an exhibit celebrating Cinnamon's life and contributions, was featured at the Jewish Museum of Florida-FIU in 2018. And the giant of all entertainment centers is New York's 28-acre, $25 billion Hudson Yards project, brought to you by the most powerful city shaper in modern times, Stephen Ross. Stephen Ross graduated from Miami Beach High School in 1958, attended the University of Florida, and became the founding chair of the related companies. Ross is shown here standing on the highest outdoor observation deck in the Western Hemisphere, called The Edge, at his Hudson Yards, which as of this past November 2021, for $185, you too can buy a ticket and climb 1,300 feet above Manhattan. In 1996, Ross built his first mixed-use project in Palm Beach. In 2000, in West Palm Beach, his company opened a City Place, a $600 million, 72-acre mixed-use project that combines entertainment, retail, and residential. He now has 1,000 projects around the world. Ross owns 95% of the Miami Dolphins football team and has a home with his wife in Palm Beach. One of his projects is The Shed, a new center for artistic invention, commissions, and presents work by artists across multiple disciplines. This is, of course, in New York City. This is violinist George Orner in Jacksonville in 1928. Orner was a teacher and the director of the Jacksonville College of Music. He was the founder of the orchestra that is now known as the Jacksonville Symphony, one of Florida's longest-standing orchestras. Child protege David Cohen came to Sarasota in 1948. He was co-founder of the Florida West Coast Symphony, and in its early years, its business manager, president, and concertmaster. When he was Sarasota's mayor from 1964 to 66, he identified the need for a new arts venue. Cohen obtained a major grant from the Lewis and Eugenia Van Wezel Foundation and envisioned on Sarasota Bay the Van Wezel Performing Arts Hall, where the David Cohen Rehearsal Center is named in his honor. Sid Hoffman, Sid Hoffman's violinist father, started him on violin at the age of 6. At 17, he conducted the Philadelphia Orchestra. He even carried a violin in a tank during World War II. Hoffman arrived in St. Petersburg, Florida, because there is a St. Petersburg, Russia. We're talking about Florida. Came in 1967 and merged the Tampa and St. Petersburg orchestras. He memorized his symphonies and conducted without a score or baton, keeping musicians on track with hand gestures and facial expressions. His wife, Esther Glaser, often soloed, and their 4 children were required to study an instrument. After 19 years in Florida, Hoffman went on to conduct orchestras in Colombia, Costa Rica, and Arizona. When Eric Jacobson was named the primary conductor and music director of the Orlando Philharmonic Orchestra in 2015, he became the 3rd Jewish orchestra conductor music director in Central Florida. A Tampa native, Eleanor Ross used her gift as a dramatic soprano voice to advance to stardom at the Metropolitan Opera in New York. Ross enjoyed a successful national and international career. A graduate of Miami Beach High School, Judy Drucker was a coloratura soprano with the Coral Gables Philharmonic Symphony in 1948 and performed on Broadway with the Greater Miami Opera and at the Palm Island Latin Quarter of Lou Walters that I mentioned earlier. In 1967, she organized the first concert at Temple Beth Shalom on Miami Beach and began bringing world-famous performers. 15 years later, Drucker formed the Concert Association of Florida on Miami Beach. Friend and confidant to classical musical stars from Itzhak Perlman to Luciano Pavarotti, she put South Florida on the cultural map, bringing 126 concerts. In 2008, the state of Florida officially declared a portion of Biscayne Boulevard outside the Adrian Arch Center as Judy Drucker Boulevard. An avid music lover, Mac Emmerman made a living in the 1950s in Florida by recording nightclub bands. He established his own studio in Miami in 1958, Criteria Recording Studios, which developed a close relationship with Atlantic Records, whose affiliated artists included Eric Clapton and Aretha Franklin. In their heyday, Emmerman's studios were used by Jimmy Buffett, Casey and the Sunshine Band, Bob Seger, Aerosmith, and ABBA. As the record industry declined in the 1980s, so too did Criteria's success. Emmerman sold his studio in the 1980s and spent several years working at other recording locations before retiring. The hotels, such as Eden Rock and Fontainebleau on Miami Beach, were meccas for live entertainment as they competed for visitors and the movie and television industries during the 1950s and early 60s. The Rat Pack put Frank Sinatra and friends in their ballrooms, and Sammy Davis Jr. and Peter Lawford often appeared with Dean Martin. Those were the days. You remember those? The Diplomat on the Atlantic Ocean, Broward County's most important hotel to open since the 1920s, was designed to compete with Miami Beach. The masterpiece of Samuel Friedland's hotels broke ground in 1956. Its claim to fame was the parade of stars that entertained at the Cafe Crystal, Tack Room, and Regency Ballroom. I want to note that this hotel was designed again by Norman Giller, the Jewish Museum of Florida's first president of the board. This is his rendering. Cruise ships are another entertainment center, as well as major economic drivers for our state, of course, until COVID. Florida is the nation's #1 cruise state, often referred to as the cruise capital of the world. Today, there are 3 major public cruise lines, and all 3 are chaired by Jews: Mickey Arison at Carnival, Richard Fain at Royal Caribbean, and Russell Galvin at Norwegian. And of course, I include them here because of the great entertainment they have on the ships. Toby Lerner Anson in the center founded the Miami City Ballet in 1985. After a conversation with ballet legend Edward Villela, she decided ballet was what South Florida needed to round out its cultural life, and enticed 6 friends to join her in supporting the cause by each contributing $1,000. Today, the Miami City Ballet is universally admired as one of the world's preeminent interpreters of the choreography of George Balanchine. Miami City Ballet, founded in 1993, is one of the largest dance training programs in the nation. Arnold Newman was the creator of environmental portraiture. In 1992, when I was negotiating the lease for the building that was to become the Jewish Museum of Florida, I dealt with congregation president Ed Newman and found out that his older brother, Arnold Newman, was the famous photographer. The Newman family had settled on Miami Beach in 1936. Arnold showed artistic talent at a young age and graduated from Miami Beach High School. Then he went to the University of Miami for art classes. In 1941, Arnold went to New York, where he became internationally renowned, pioneering a style that places the subject in a carefully composed setting, capturing the essence of their work and personality. Newman received many international awards. In 2000, I went to New York to visit Arnold, and while walking through the snow in Central Park in a freezing January, I convinced him to exhibit at the Jewish Museum of Florida his 53 portraits of significant Jews taken over 6 decades. I had to book One World, One People several years out, of course, and he kept calling me to say, I will not live that long. Well, he did, and he appeared at the opening, and when he died, he left that collection to our museum. I have heard it said that there isn't a photographer alive today who was not influenced by Arnold Newman. Frank Eliscu began his sculpting career at the age of 7 when he took the tallow from the Shabbat candles into the tub and molded it into horses' heads. He went on to create the glass panels above the doors of the Library of Congress, national monuments, important museum pieces, many works for Steuben Glass, and more, including many exhibitions. When he moved to Sarasota, he became a city institution, designing sculptures for the Van Wezel Performing Arts Center, the Ringling Museum of Art, synagogues, and many more. In 1935, Ellis created the Heisman Trophy, the highest honor in college football. The Heisman Committee invited him to speak at the 50th anniversary of the Heisman ceremonies. Hayam Goldberg was a Polish painter, sculptor, and engraver. He was known for being a chronicler of Jewish life in the shtetl, where he was born, Kazimierz Dolny, and as a painter of Holocaust-era art. His interest in art began in childhood as he explored the riverbanks and looked for shapes that lay hidden within the rocks. His large family lived in a tiny cottage built by his cobbler father. They slept on the floor to accommodate klezmer musicians and other travelers whose stories were inspirations for his primitive, expressive paintings and their life-size sculptures. He served in the Polish army and lost most of his family in the Holocaust. Following World War II, he and his wife, Rachel, first immigrated to Israel and then settled finally in Boca Raton in 1986. He built a spacious studio and was very prolific. He was driven by a sense of history and an urgency to retrieve the memories of his Polish past while being torn to respond to the new world in which he was living. Sola was a river near Auschwitz, the concentration camp, into which ashes from the crematoria were disposed. Widely known as Tampa Bay's leading artist for much of the second half of the 20th century, William Puckner immigrated from Czechoslovakia to the United States in 1939 to pursue an art career. After the war, when he learned that more than 80 members of his family were murdered in the Holocaust, he dedicated his life to expressing deep emotions through fine art. In the 1970s, he established a home and a studio in Tampa, where he taught at art centers and had many solo art shows. One of the largest artworks in the world is at Miami International Airport. It is Michelle O'Connor's A Walk on the Beach, the 1 1/4 linear mile floor in Terminal D, Level 2. It is seen by 40 million travelers annually and is composed of more than 9,000 bronzes embedded in terrazzo with mother of pearl. Donna was born on the Miami beach to an artist's mother and judge and mayor father. You see in the lower left her father Ken Oka's campaign poster for mayor of Miami Beach in 1957, and it's in Yiddish. Donna absorbed the natural world around her. The breadth of her art encompasses sculpture, public art, furniture, jewelry, and functional objects. This is a rendering of Tampa native Janet Eckelman's bending arc fiber sculpture at the new waterfront pier in downtown St. Petersburg that was installed in 2019, her first in Florida, even though she had installed on every continent of the world. The sculpture is 428 feet by 76 feet. And she says, and I quote, "I chose this title, Bending Arc, for my largest permanent piece to date because it is about inclusion, embracing everyone to come to this place," end quote. The billowing net sculpture required 84 miles of twine and more than 1 million knots woven into custom-colored polytetrafluoroethylene fiber. Eckelman is a 4th-generation Floridian in the Ripa pioneer family who came from Romania to Key West in the 1880s, and then some went to Tampa. Her work intersects sculpture, architecture, urban design, material science, sculptural and aeronautical engineering, and computer science. Her TED Talks have been translated into 35 languages. That's how popular they are. Oprah ranked Eckelman's work #1 on her list of 50 things that make you say, wow. And she received the Smithsonian American Ingenuity Award in Visual Arts, honoring the greatest innovators in America today. Norman Brayman was having lunch with his friend, real estate developer Craig Robbins, and said, "I'd love to have a museum." Robbins said, "I have this piece of land." And it was that simple for Irma and Norma Brayman to birth the $75 million museum, 37,500 square feet, that opened in 2017 in Miami's Design District. The focus is on emerging artists who have yet to receive much institutional exposure, or mid to late career artists whose work is being discovered for the first time in America. Jay Kislak donated his $30 million collection of rare books, manuscripts, and historic artifacts to these two colleges, University of Miami and Miami-Dade College. He said, and I quote, "For 500 years, Florida has been a focal point of global exploration and cultural exchange. I'm thrilled that Miami's top two institutions of higher education, along with the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., will now be using our collections to reveal the fascinating and important role of our community in world history," end quote. Each institution received a first edition of the famous 1493 letter of Christopher Columbus, in which the explorer described his New World discoveries to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain. Jay Kislak made his mark in real estate and establishing what would become one of the country's largest privately held mortgage banks. A Miami resident for more than 60 years, he was a lifelong collector, focusing particularly on Florida and the Caribbean exploration, navigation, and the early Americas. In 2004, he and his foundation donated to the Library of Congress more than 4,000 items, including the 1516 Carter Marinara Navigatoria, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, the first printed navigational map of the world. The Kislak collection forms the basis of a major exhibition and extensive scholarly and public programs at the Library of Congress. McKinley Cantor's father was a Swedish Jew, descended from a long line of rabbis. Cantor began his career helping his mother edit a newspaper. She was the McKinley. Cantor moved to Sarasota in 1936. During World War II, when he was a war correspondent, Cantor entered the Buchenwald concentration camp as it was liberated on April 14, 1945. Over the next decade, that experience informed his research for and writing of Andersonville in 1955, his novel about the Confederate prisoner of war camp. He wrote 43 books, several set during the Civil War, and received the Pulitzer Prize in 1956. Two of his books have a Florida setting, The Noises of Their Wings about the Everglades and Beauty Beast about North Florida. Sid Hoff was best known for Danny and the Dinosaur, an enduring bestseller for beginning readers that has been translated into a dozen languages and has sold more than 10 million copies since it first appeared in 1958. Hoff said, "The best humor has to do with events that people can identify as has happened to them, or something that has been in the subconscious," end quote. In 2013, his former home in Miami Beach was designated a historic literary landmark, one of only 18 in Florida, and there is a Sid Hoff Children's Writer Residency program on Miami Beach. E.L. Konigsberg lived in Jacksonville since the 1960s and wrote and illustrated 20 children's books and young adult fiction. Gleaning ideas from observing people and reading, she is one of only 6 writers to win 2 Newbery Medals for the most distinguished contribution to American children's literature. From the mixed up files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler in 1968, she chronicles the adventures of siblings who became involved in solving a mystery while hiding out in New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art. That novel became a feature film in 1973 with Ingrid Bergman as Mrs. Frankweiler, and a made-for-movie television movie in 1995 with Lauren Bacall. Native, born in 1957, Howard Kamner is the author of the acclaimed autobiography Turbulence of 67 Inches in 2009, and 17 poetry books, including the Pulitzer Prize nominated Poems from the Mudroom. His books are in prominent literary collections worldwide and historical archives throughout the United States. He is a regular contributor to several publications and has earned many awards. Did you know that Jewish Floridians were instrumental in creating many of the comic book characters that we have become so familiar with over the years? In fact, we did an exhibit on that, if you recall, many years ago at the Jewish Museum of Florida. Without Will Eisner, we would not have The Spirit or such innovative graphic novels as A Contract with God. Will Eisner, the father of the graphic novel, was the son of Jewish immigrants, and his experiences growing up in New York tenements became the inspiration for much of his graphic novel work. In fact, today, the graphic novel is America's fastest growing literary genre. In 1940, Eisner created his most famous character, the Spirit, which ran until 1952. This masked crime fighter was the lead feature in an innovative format, a 16-page color comic book that was inserted in Sunday newspapers and ultimately carried by 20 newspapers, with a combined circulation of 5 million copies during the 1940s. From the 1960s to the 1980s, a handful of new Eisner Spirit stories appeared in newspapers and comic books. Eisner's career spanned nearly 70 years, from the dawn of comic books to the advent of digital comics. In 1988, the comic community paid tribute to Eisner by creating the Will Eisner Comic Industry Awards, one of comic industry's most prestigious awards. He died in 2005 in Fort Lauderdale, where he had lived. In 2011, The Spirit was ranked 21st in the top 100 comic book heroes of all time. North Miami Beach High School graduate Brad Meltzer is a best-selling American author who has written nonfiction and crime fiction. He is also a TV show creator, host of Brad Meltzer's Decoded on the History Channel, and a comic book writer. You've probably read one of his books. Brad Meltzer was one of the only authors to ever had books on the bestseller list for nonfiction, advice, children's books, and even graphic books at the same time. His books have been translated into more than 25 languages. He has worked with numerous organizations throughout Florida to promote literacy. For those of you new to my history programs, you may be wondering, how do I know what I now know? The Jewish history of Florida was hidden, unknown prior to 1984. The Northeast scholars assumed that it started post-World War II, and they really didn't care. A small group of us called the Mosaic Project Team wanted to change that and mounted a traveling exhibit on the subject and needed to dig out the history. I was a state coordinator and set up volunteer task forces in communities all over the state, eventually traveling 250,000 miles to manage this effort. Being a product of 1940s and 50s public schools, when I began my research in the 1980s, my inclination was to go to the public library, but there were no books on the subject. I went to the state archives in Tallahassee, and they had nothing, zero, on Florida's Jews. And this was before Google and Wikipedia, if you can imagine that. So the primary method was oral histories. During this process, all of us that were on the teams doing oral histories all over the state, we asked for photos and artifacts that supported the stories. An important part of the process was to create a database on a 512K Mac that came out in 1984, resulting in an archive that was the basis for creating the Jewish Museum of Florida in 1995. This database was good enough to get the museum accredited by the American Alliance of Museums and continues to be used and expanded. I'm going to skip through these next couple slides because I think probably most of you know that led to the Mosaic exhibit, and then I created the museum. And I'm going to skip some of these because I think a lot of you have already heard my lectures. 53% of the nation's population aged 35 to 40 also consider social networking sites as a form of entertainment. I checked on my family on Facebook. Isn't that how we track our children and grandchildren? Sheryl Sandberg has been #2 at Facebook since 2008. She grew up in North Miami Beach and maintains a circle of women friends for middle and high school there. And now we've come back to Isaac Bashevis Singer. While a resident of Surfside and sitting at a back table in Sheldon Drugs, he learned that he had received the 1978 Nobel Prize in Literature, the first Yiddish writer to win this award. He accepted the $165,000 award modestly. When I met Polish-born Yiddish writer and Nobel Prize winner Isaac Bashevis Singer on Miami Beach in the 1980s, he regaled me with his impressions of the palm tree and reminded me that the immigrants who came to Florida from all over the world did not come to forget their history, origin, or ethnic identities. They came for the freedom to grow in their own culture, in their own way of life, attached to their roots and hopes, while becoming part of the whole of their new place. We love entertainment. Entertainment is an escape from the real world, which we need today, from work, school, and the daily stresses of life. Entertainment brings light to our lives and makes us happy, often inspiring people to believe that they can do and be more. The industry influences society and culture dramatically. And over the decades, Jews have contributed largely to entertainment in Florida. Their work makes us smile, and that's a very good thing. I hope you enjoyed my stories. In summary, Jews are like cut flowers. We die without roots. These stories are our collective historic memories, our roots. I've shared much less than 1% of the stories I gathered over my 35 years of research throughout Florida, and about 5% of what is in the book. Our memories of history help define us. The stories entertain us and are important to strengthen Jewish pride and identity, to help ensure Jewish continuity, the most important thing. Before I close, I want to acknowledge the museum manager, Nancy Cohen, for providing 4 stories with photos that I shared with you that are not in my book. At this point in my live talk, I usually go to the back of the room to sell and sign books. It is my wish that you will share these centuries of stories and keep them alive. Please consider buying my book at the museum or on the website for yourself, your children, your grandchildren, or a friend. The purchase helps support the museum's budget. Thank you so much for letting me entertain you.
Well, Marcia, let me start my video. Marcia, thank you so very much for such an incredible amount of information that you shared with us in such a short period of time. And I know how much I enjoyed it, and I'm sure all of our guests did as well. And what a way to kick off our 2022 season. So thank you so much for being with us today. There may be people who have some questions, and we're out of time. Nancy, could you put up the website? Wonderful.
Of course.
Some comments, yeah. And if you write to us with your questions, we'll make sure they get to Marcia.
Or they can email me. I love to answer questions. And I want to wish everyone a happy Jewish History Month.
Thank you. Do you want to put up your email, Marcia, on the
chat? Let's see, how do I do that?
Go to the chat.
Goes in the chat.
At the bottom.
Oh, okay. Chat. I never get the chance to do that.
I can, Susan, I can send out a reminder to everybody that registers.
Okay.
For the
I'll put it up.
As well as the information about the book.
And thank you to all of you, our guests, for joining us. We very much appreciate your support, and we look forward to seeing you in person as soon as you possibly can, and at other of our virtual programs going forward. And there's Marcia's email for anyone who would like to write to her directly. So again, Happy New Year. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Bye.
I just want to add before everybody hangs up that we will have a recording of this program at on our YouTube channel from the Jewish Museum of Florida-FIU, and also to remind everybody that hopefully we're going to be open again to the public on Wednesday, January the 5th. So thank you and Happy New Year to everybody. This is Nancy Cohen And thank you so much to everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Bye.